Look out here and see so many familiar faces. It's just great. It's like a party. If you can't hear Hal or me, just start waving your hands wildly, okay? And we'll know what it means, because I just hate to be in the audience and not be able to hear anything. So, okay. All right. So here's a little intro. Today, at age 81, my husband, Hal Crowther, is still.
You didn't put that in there.
I'm the same age. My husband, Hal Crowther, is still, as he has always been, a working writer. He was never a person who, quote, wanted to write or took a few courses in creative writing. Raised in upstate New York by a dedicated high school English teacher mother and a highly opinionated father who was a law professor, Hal attended first Williams College and then the Columbia School of Journalism, and then went straight to work for Time and then Newsweek magazine, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Narrative, Granta, you name it, and he was published there before coming south, and where he ended up here, and we read him. We read him first locally in the Spectator magazine. Remember the Spectator magazine? Which he helped to start when they were starting it, and then the wonderful Independent Weekly. Now, Hal has 7 books to his credit as well. 4 collections of his essays and a book on H.L. Mencken. For his 3rd collection of essays, he was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Prize for Criticism. And he has also worked on several TV series and several films. So he's done a lot of different things. And I think I would have to say that your major topics include religion, maybe we would say. I mean, this is the Bible Belt Blues. There's Bible right there in the title, and 3 essays in a section entitled "Stations of the Cross." So, what's going on here? You writing about religion?
We're starting with religion.
Uh-huh.
It seems sort of like a home field advantage to have your.
You got to talk right in.
Hear me? How about this?
Like a rock star.
Turn
it on.
Turn it like this.
Is it on?
Elvis.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes. Rock star.
It's like a home field advantage, I guess, to have your own wife up here. But on the other hand, you know that with her here, I can't lie or exaggerate. So I'm surprised that we started with religion. This is a collection, I guess, of everything that's upset me in the last decade and a half. And there's only 2 or 3 essays in this collection that are what you would call in any way upbeat. And yeah, I guess the religious section is probably the easiest for a person who's not exercising their indignation. I'd like to, could I read a couple of I have 2 different takes on religion.
Oh yeah, please do. Yeah.
I should say that at one time I did apply to divinity school. I guess it isn't a strange transition from being a man in a pulpit to being a man at a typewriter. And I'm pretty glad I didn't go to divinity school. But it's been a journey, and I've always been really interested in religion. And I think the reason is that, in the world of facts, I worked as a journalist all my life. I'm pretty, let's say, I take strong stands, okay, about what's true and what's not true. But in something like religion, which depends so much on, where we come from, where we were raised, our cultural backgrounds, some people basically adopt every single thing that their parents believed in, and some reject every single thing that their parents believed in. And it's always fascinated me as a subject of conversation. It's something where I could find out who that person is, and politics doesn't work for me. You go over a certain line and I'm not comfortable anymore. So I'll read you a couple of things from the religion section of this book. Okay. Atheist is a title I never coveted. The best-selling atheist authors like Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens seem immodestly confrontational to me. And the God they reject, that alpha male with a lot of attitude and a lot of rules, is an easy target, unworthy of their intellect. More challenging definitions of God have enriched the theological conversation for a long, long time. Back in the 17th century, the Jewish philosopher Baruch Spinoza, sitting grinding lenses in his shop in The Hague, conceived of a God inseparable from nature, from creation. God is the world, sums up Spinoza's deity. Contemporaries described him as a God-intoxicated man, and his God encompassed everything that humbled humanity and stretched the limits of its understanding and imagination. Though agnostic is a label that concedes human ignorance in a modest way that I respect, I'd rather be called a pantheist, a Spinozan like Emerson, like Einstein. Quote, God is the awareness of the infinite in each of us. Annie Dillard wrote that once. And that simple formula works for me. I may be ignorant and skeptical, but I'm not insensible, not incurious, not emptied of spiritual potential. In a nutshell, not a hard shell. That's how it looks to me now, with final things not as far ahead as they used to be. What's the difference between my testimony and the preaching of Pat Robertson or even Billy Graham? For one thing, there's not a missionary bone in my body. If everyone who read this suddenly decided that I was 100% right, I'd begin to lose confidence that I was in the right track. The biggest problem with organized religions, especially with fundamentalist religions from Gainesville to Kandahar, is that they require and compel consensus. The important part of religion is what you believe when you're in your room alone, not what you profess to believe in a crowd of believers. Alone in that room, your remote corner, you can send out a spiritual message in search of a soulmate, or to be on the safe side, you can even keep it to yourself, as I know I'll manage to do someday soon. And I'll read you just another short thing about a couple of people that I really admired. The Berrigan brothers, the warrior priests, the pacifist. I met both of them and did a long interview with Father Phil when he was in the prison at Edenton for smashing some kind of a bomb with a hammer.
Grab your microphone.
Grab your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to hold all these things. Okay.
Hold it close.
I will. Neither their country nor their church ever lived up to the Berrigans' expectations. And nothing about the way we live in this country offers much hope there'll be another generation of radical priests to hold America's feet to the spiritual fire. There are no schools that breed Christian soldiers of their unbending creed. To insist as they did that war, militarism, and gun violence are all one disease, and one linked inseparably to all the other diseases: oppression, poverty, starvation, racism, environmental degradation that threaten to bring the human adventure to a premature conclusion. War is insane and disgusting, and it will be with us always. Can traditional religion, burdened by its own history, disrespected by science, crowded almost into the shadows by conspicuous consumption and metastasizing technology, still inspire unusual individuals to live heroically on a consistently higher moral plane? The answer, for anyone familiar with the Berrigan brothers, is a confident yes. But there's always my other question, which I'd never be rude enough to pose to a man of faith. If God made and loves us all, why did he make so many of us cruel and stupid? Back to you.
Okay, and another topic that you deal with here is, of course, journalism, because since you began, and you mentioned it as the rapid decline of my profession, and so would you talk to us about journalism and what is happening and why?
Yeah, it's a kind of a bloodbath, actually. It's terrifying what's happening, even overlooking the fact that there are people in Washington who are trying to intimidate the entire media professions into shutting up and going away. And the number of papers that have been closed down and the number of people who are currently out of work, who are valuable people with skills that we need desperately, it's really very discouraging. And I guess one of the major points that I try to make in a couple of essays in this collection is that I'm afraid that all the adventures that we've had with technology and the internet in the past 30 years have an awful lot to do with this. There was a time when a few sources of information had really earned the public's trust and had worked for a long time. I used to work for editors back in the 60s and 70s who just, whatever their politics were, they just deeply believed that you had to get it right. And now, although I know nothing about these people who make death threats and so on to anybody they disagree with, and who are on 20 different platforms where they're constantly responding to all this, I know nothing about that. I have sworn an oath never to go on social media. But I have a bad feeling that this is not going to change. And it's not going to go back the other way. And the kind of journalism that I learned, I went to school in New York at Columbia, and of course that's where all the media were, and we had all kinds of really prominent people teaching classes and so on, Jimmy Breslin and David Brinkley and people like that. But back in those days, the idea of declaring that you belonged even to a political party, Walter Cronkite never admitted that he was a Democrat until he went off the air at the age of 84 or something like that. And it was really important. And I think, myself, that I know it's considering the way we're polarized today, that I'm sort of an archaic, but I have never belonged to or contributed any money to any political party. Yeah. And if I had to say one thing about this book, I'm not trying to sell anything to anybody. I'm trying to argue, and hoping that people will respond in a way, that I will learn, and even maybe they will learn. And I could read a little bit. Excuse me, here I go down again. Let me read this to you instead. That name Trump, which years ago I prayed I'd never have to type again, will be encountered many times in these pages. The name itself is like a fire bell in the night. If you're not frightened, you're not paying attention. The hulking primate who's attached to this name has cast a long shadow over the decades that these essays encompass. He's not the cause, but more accurately, the unlikely symbol of destructive changes in the collective mind of America. I wouldn't blame it all on social media, but 20 years ago, anyone who predicted that Donald Trump would be a two-term president of the United States would have been dismissed as a madman or a cynic too savage to be credible. As it happens, as I'm writing this, he's preparing to swear his second oath of office on Martin Luther King Day. Looking back over what I've written, I see that his first flash of interest in the presidency back in 2012 was dismissed by me as a laughing matter, hard proof the Republican Party had sunk below the waterline. I cited him as one of the most ridiculous celebrities who had ever caught America's attention. And this is sort of a caution warning about this book, which I probably should have started with. Since no one who admires or respects Mr. Trump will be likely to read this book, I address myself only to his detractors when I describe my approach to the 47th president as more clinical than political. Key members of his first cabinet and several members of his extended family have warned us that he is mentally ill. Atomic crazy, writes his own nephew. Buttressed by the 245 psychiatrists and mental health professionals who signed a pre-election letter in 2024, diagnosing him as a malignant narcissist in rapid cognitive decline. It concluded with this warning, quote, "Without question, malignant narcissists have been history's most grandiose, paranoid, and murderous leaders. Inevitably, they escalate until they're completely out of control, ultimately destroying themselves and the nations they lead." Hail to the chief. There's quite a bit of this material in here. As they say, if it offends you, please don't rush the stage. So far, I have suffered no physical attacks while I've been promoting this book. Well, Lee, you wanted to, what was it? You wanted to talk, what was the other subject that you had there?
Oh, well, I guess, let's see, just, I guess about journalism itself. And, you know, as we say, you've been a working journalist all this time, but the rapid decline, you've been concerned about the rapid decline of your own profession, you've said, due to technology, cultural decline, and hostile politicians, and social media. So, which is something you haven't said much about, which has certainly changing everything.
Well, what I said before about journalism, you know, in the era of AI, you can just triple that. Already they're having people, they can put your face on a picture of somebody molesting a child and send it out all over the world. It's possible, it's being done as we speak. And the future is really grim, and I'm not really sure, particularly if there's no one in Washington who's capable of turning it around, of putting a great deal of pressure on these companies. And I don't see anything going in that direction very soon. Elon Musk said he's amused by the fact that you can do these things, these deep fakes, where you put one person's head on another person's body. People like Elon Musk, they rule the world, and at the moment they're very close to power in our particular country. After I spoke a minute ago about Trump and said that I believe that he's insane, I just want to read you something remarkable. If you have any doubt at all, listen to this. President Trump unleashed a salvo of 89 social media posts between 12:45 a.m. and 1:40 a.m. on a Sunday night, averaging one post every 37 seconds. Trump's fusillade touched on such topics as Somali daycare fraud, the stolen 2020 election, and Barack Obama's ineligibility to be president of the United States. If that isn't a madman, I don't think I've ever known one. And he also said the other day when they mentioned that he was losing support from his people, from the MAGA people. He said, I'm not losing support. They love me. They've always loved me. I am MAGA. I am MAGA. And they love what I do. They love everything I do. I love everything I do. He actually said that. And I don't know, besides being mad as a hatter, he's also probably, the most low rent person in terms of his manners that has ever held public office in this country. I knew Rob Reiner, a wonderful man, a remarkable man. And what he said after Reiner's horrible, unthinkably horrible death was just unbelievable. That he's not good for this country, that he was, the only reason this happened is because he had Trump derangement syndrome and so on. He went on and on. And even then, I have to say, some of the Republicans had enough. They did denounce him after that. But it was just absolutely spectacular. And he does it every day. Every day.
Yeah. Well, okay. And let me, I think most of us are nodding. I think we are really in agreement about Trump, but stuck here at the moment. I want you to say just a couple of words about journalism, because
haven't we been there?
Well, I know we did that. I know we did that. But it does seem to me it's something you haven't mentioned as much, which is really troubles me, is just social media as a whole.
Well, I think what I said before about it, spreading it out so that there's a huge number of totally unreliable people and people who have, who are not only reaching for your wallet, but are trying to convince you of something, that they believe in, that you ought to leave alone. And unfortunately, there's so many people now who have pretty much grown up with this and around it in such a way that I don't think, we go up against our own children and grandchildren, and this is an argument that I don't do well with. And I was telling a cousin of mine who's a teenager that when I was young, of course, she can't even imagine ever young, but when I was young, we almost never used the telephone. Of course, cell phones had not been invented, and your parents did not want you on their home phone. I mean, I had to ask permission, and as I recall, it was rarely given. And I used to meet my friends without prearrangement, on the baseball field or the basketball court or something. And we were virtually never on the phone. And it's a habit that I've kept and loved through all these years. H.L. Mencken hated the phone. And I think I have always hated it for the same reason, because it grabs you by the shoulder when you might not want to be grabbed. And it takes up time that you haven't granted anyone. And I've probably been on fewer hours on the phone than anyone else my age in America. And I'm not ashamed. I'm not, really not. This does not extend to my wife. Yeah.
Hal, you at least talked about you being a working writer your entire life. And here you are, you're continuing to write on, and I want to know what keeps you writing.
Well, indignation is always been my strong suit, I think, you know. I don't know, yeah, I think one of the things we were going to talk about is like a critic's progress, all right?
Yes.
My first job at Time Magazine when I was 24, I was the people writer. I got to walk into restaurants with Muhammad Ali and so on, you know. And I think the first time that I was allowed to use my critical facility was when I reviewed a book, Custer Died for Your Sins, by an Indian writer, Vine Deloria. And that was the first time I was ever, say, licensed to criticize. And I liked it. And I think for the past 55 years, I've been one of those people licensed, you know, to say what I thought, which is something very addictive. Now, it's true that if the readership surveys show that your congregation is very small, they will revoke your license. And you probably noticed that columnists, I was a syndicated columnist for about 30 years or something. Columnists are disappearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember, you all are familiar with my friend Barry Saunders, who used to be a columnist for the NNL. Barry said a wonderful thing once, which I quote all the time. He said, what is this about, you know, liberal and conservative and Democratic and Republican? He said, I always thought that intelligent people responded to each issue on its own merits. They didn't buy packages. I love that.
That's great.
But people like Barry, you know, are now they're substacking and so on. I know people with Pulitzer Prizes who don't currently have an editor and an outlet. And myself, I now publish most of my political work out of Austin, Texas, progressive populist. I have an editor who loves me, and I'm going to stick with him as long as I can. But it's and Narrative magazine in San Francisco is also a very sympathetic place. But I spent many years as a critic of, well, I was a television critic in New York, and then I went to film and drama and books and so on. And then I came to North Carolina. It wasn't a career choice, actually, it was a divorce, I think. It wasn't that I had decided. Actually, Lee didn't make it clear, but I was a child in Charleston, South Carolina, and in Norfolk when my father was in the naval yards there. So I did have 6 or 7 years of southernness before I returned. You can tell my accent isn't authentic compared to hers. But yeah, and then finally, when I came south, I had spent most of my life arts and entertainment critic, and all of a sudden, there was Jesse Helms.
Tell them about when you met Jesse.
The only time I ever met him, we were both at Nowell's clothing store in Raleigh. Schooner Nowell was a friend of mine, and we were both trying on clothes. I was trying on a jacket, and I had the advantage of Jesse because he was trying on some pants. and we were both at that time about 6'2.5", 6'3", so we could see each other over the And I just said, "Good morning, Senator." And he just sort of and pulled his pants up. That's the only time I ever met him. But the situation, the political situation in North Carolina, one of the first times I came down here was just after the Greensboro massacre. And my critical self said, this is where I want to go. And I've been doing it since, and I'm never short of material.
Sarah? Any other questions from
questions?
the audience? Yes, yes.
Lee mentioned the wonderful North Carolina Independent Weekly,
Yes.
and for which you worked for many years, right?
Many years, yeah.
What's your fondest memory of working at that paper?
My fondest memory. Okay, you know Barry Yeoman. Remember Barry? One of our African American employees said, "Well, Barry, you're just a spoiled boy from the suburbs." He said, "How would you know anything about oppression?" And Barry, who stutters, said, "Oppression? I'm a gay Jewish stutterer." And that's one thing that sticks out in my mind. She didn't say another word. He said, "I know all about oppression." No, I had a lot of fun working with Catherine Fulton, who was a person who was a wonderful journalist and very serious, and it wasn't easy to sort of sell my style to her, but what we achieved over years of working together is a lot of mutual, respect. And of course, Steve Schewel, one of the most honest people and sort of decent people I've ever worked with in my life, and still a good friend of mine. Yeah, so any questions about that?
A follow-up to that.
Oh, yeah.
Where is Catherine Fulton these days?
She's in Northern California. She and Kathy moved out there, and they worked on several publications, but I think they're retired now. She was recently in Durham. She's fine. Yeah, she's been gone for a while. Yeah.
What's it like with two writers in one house?
Well, I think it would be difficult if we did the same thing. I wrote my last fiction when I was 23, and I've had no temptation to do it since. Lee has no respect for facts whatsoever. And of course has published 18 books of fiction. So we never saw it as a competition. I think maybe if we had both been poets, and one was in the New Yorker every week, and the other one couldn't get in anywhere, that might be a problem. I don't know.
Yeah.
Basically, you shouldn't ever compete with your partner. That's just life advice rather than writerly advice. I think. Anything more? Yeah.
Yeah, one more here. Yeah.
I get the impression from some of your essays and Lee's introduction that you do a better job than a lot of us in resisting the screen
There's a
time.
word I missed there, I'm sorry.
I said, I get the impression from Lee's introduction and some of the comments in your essays that you do a better job than most of us in limiting your screen time. And I wonder if you get, I'm just curious, on average, how much time do you spend looking at a screen, and do you have any tips for resisting?
Yeah.
I spent very little time looking at the screen. I was a film critic for years and enjoyed it a great deal back when the movies were good. Or at least in the 70s. But after I was a television critic, I sort of gave up television entirely. And I think I'm one of the few people who could say that I did a little work out on the West Coast. I wrote things like the Karen Valentine Show and a couple of Kojaks and things like that. I think you could say that I had written more TV than I had watched at one point over like a 30-year period. And I have no television habit. I own a cell phone, but I check it maybe twice a day. And of course I work on a computer, and you look up things from time to time. I don't know. I think my screen time is pretty low compared to most people. I read, I mean, you have to read.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've read all her books.
One more, yeah.
Tell us about the progressive populists.
Progressive populist is,
Yes.
is the last remnant of liberal thought in Texas. At one time, as you know, when Ann Richards was a governor and so on, and my Columbia classmate, Molly Ivins, was one of the most interesting columnists in America. There was a really strong liberal presence in it. It's boiled down to a handful of people now in Austin. And the progressive populist was started by a couple of brothers named Cullen. Molly's the one who turned me onto it about 30 years ago. And the people that are in there, I mean, they have Ralph Nader and Jesse Jackson, Amy Goodman, Robert Reich, the former secretary. I mean, it's just everybody on the left that you've ever heard of. They're all in there. They had Garrison Keillor at one time as well, and Tom Hartman. Some of you probably know Tom Hartman, and these people are very outspoken. Right? These things I've been saying do not stand out for being outspoken in a place like it. And it's online and has a printed version you can subscribe to, and I endorse it. I think it's great. I'm usually on the cover.
Any more questions? Okay, well, we'll just get together and talk and sign some books.
Thank you.
Thank you.